Hello, welcome to Secret Zone. Subscribe and turn on notifications for stories you won't forget. That evening began like so many others, wrapped in routine and quiet trust. The kind that grows slowly between two people who believe they know each other completely. I remember standing in the kitchen, scrolling on my phone, thinking about how lucky I was to have a wife so dedicated to her work. Someone who sacrificed sleep, comfort, and time together because her job mattered. She had told me she was on duty at the hospital again, another long shift that would keep her away until morning. Her voice on the phone earlier had sounded rushed, almost strained, but I told myself it was just exhaustion. Hospitals were demanding places, after all. Still, as the nights settled in, a strange restlessness took hold of me. A quiet feeling I couldn't explain. It wasn't suspicion, not yet, just a tug at the back of my mind, like a thought trying to surface but not quite ready. I decided, almost impulsively, that I would surprise her. Maybe bring her a coffee. Maybe just see her smile for a moment in the middle of a hard shift. It felt like a loving gesture, nothing more. As I drove toward the hospital, memories filled my head. How we used to laugh late at night, how she would talk about her work with pride, how I admired her strength and independence. I reminded myself that trust was the foundation of our marriage, that love meant believing even when doubts whispered quietly. The hospital lights came into view, bright and unforgiving against the dark sky, and my heart beat faster. Not with fear, but with anticipation. I imagined her surprise when she saw me, the way her tired face would soften, how we'd share a brief moment before she returned to her duties. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt off. The air was heavy, the kind of stillness that makes you feel like you've walked into the wrong place at the wrong time. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was just nervous. Yet with every step forward, that uneasy feeling grew stronger. I didn't know it then, but the truth was already closing in on me, waiting patiently. By the time I finally saw her, the look on her face wasn't relief or happiness. It was fear. Pure, undeniable fear. And in that instant, before a single word was spoken, I understood that this visit was not a surprise anymore. It was a discovery. The evening had started like countless others, quiet and almost comforting, the soft hum of the city outside blending with the occasional rustle of the wind through the trees. David sat at the kitchen counter, nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone lukewarm. He kept glancing at the clock every few seconds, not because he was impatient, but because a subtle sense of unease had begun to creep over him. Emily, his wife, had told him she was working a night shift at the hospital. She had said it in a calm, measured voice, the kind of voice he had come to trust over the years. Yet, beneath that calm, David thought he caught a hint of strain, a faint tremor that made his stomach twist for reasons he didn't fully understand. He tried to dismiss the feeling. Emily had always been diligent, passionate about her work, and deeply committed to helping people. Night shifts, overtime, missed dinners were all part of her life as a healthcare professional, and he had learned to accept them with a quiet understanding. He reminded himself that she was strong, independent, and capable of handling anything her demanding job could throw at her. But tonight, something felt different. There was a restlessness in him he couldn't shake, a whisper at the edge of his consciousness that told him this was not going to be an ordinary night. As he sat there, David recalled the moments they had shared earlier in the evening. Emily had kissed him lightly on the cheek, muttered a hurried, "I'll see you later," and disappeared into her coat. Her movements had been brisk, almost mechanical, and he now realized he had barely noticed the tension in her shoulders, or the slight dark circles beneath her eyes. He took another sip of coffee, the warmth doing little to calm the tightening in his chest. A thought nudged forward. Perhaps he should go see her, just for a moment, a small surprise. A gesture of care, a reminder that he was there. It wasn't suspicion, not exactly, just an inexplicable urge to be present, to witness her truth firsthand, rather than rely on words over the phone. Grabbing his keys, David stepped into the cool night air, feeling the breeze brush against his face as he walked to his car. The streets were quiet, almost empty, the occasional street lamp casting long shadows that flickered like ghosts across the pavement. His heart beat faster with each step, a combination of excitement, curiosity, and a creeping, undefined anxiety. He told himself it was normal, that this was simply anticipation. the thrill of seeing someone you love after hours apart. The drive to the hospital was filled with reflections on their life together. David remembered the quiet nights they had spent in laughter and conversation, the long walks in parks, the shared dreams whispered softly in bed, and the mundane routines that somehow bound them together in intimacy. Trust had always been their foundation. They had believed in each other completely, in honesty, loyalty, and the unspoken understanding that each would protect the other's heart. But now, as the city lights blurred past the car window, a subtle doubt whispered at the edges of his mind. He couldn't pinpoint its source, only the sensation that something hidden was waiting to reveal itself. As the hospital came into view, the familiar building looked strangely different. The bright fluorescent lights that usually comforted him now seemed harsh, almost accusatory, reflecting off the wet streets from an earlier drizzle. David's pulse quickened. He parked the car and took a moment to steady himself, inhaling the night air, telling himself it was all in his head. Hospitals were strange places at night, he reasoned. Quiet, dim, filled with hurried shadows moving behind closed doors. Yet, as he entered the lobby, the unusual stillness hit him immediately. The place that had always felt alive, a hub of activity and care, now seemed cold and unwelcoming. Staff moved past him with polite nods, but there was an oddness in their expressions. Some glanced at him as if assessing whether he belonged there. Others shot quick, subtle looks toward Emily, who was now somewhere ahead, unseen. David's chest tightened. He brushed it off as imagination, nerves, but with every step deeper into the building, the air felt heavier, each corridor longer, the hum of machines more insistent. He felt a subtle prickling at the back of his neck, an instinctive warning that he ignored at his peril. Finally, he saw her. Emily stood near the nurse's station, her figure framed by the harsh hospital lights. But the reaction he anticipated, smile, relief, brief laughter, did not appear. Instead, her eyes widened in fear, her body froze, and the warmth of recognition was replaced with a palpable tension. David's heart lurched. It wasn't surprise that he saw. It was something darker, something instinctual and raw. Before she could speak, he knew that the evening had changed irreversibly. This was no ordinary visit, no simple gesture of love. The fear etched across her face told a story she had not shared, a truth lurking beneath her composed exterior. In that moment, the world seemed to narrow down to just the two of them, surrounded by the distant beeping of machines, the low hum of ventilation, and the occasional murmur of a passing nurse. David's mind raced. Questions collided in rapid succession. Had she been lying? Why the fear? Was it something at work? Something personal? He took a cautious step forward, heart pounding, his instincts torn between compassion and the need to uncover the truth. Emily's lips parted slightly, her hands trembling, and he realized that whatever secret she harbored, it had been building toward this exact moment, and now it could no longer be contained. David felt his heartbeat in his ears as he took a cautious step toward Emily. The fear he saw in her eyes was unmistakable, raw and electric, and it seemed to radiate through the sterile hospital air, settling like a weight between them. He called her name softly, almost pleading. "Emily, it's me." But the words barely seemed to reach her. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, she looked as if she might collapse. Every instinct he had told him to reach out, to hold her, to soothe her. Yet something in her sudden stiffness warned him that this was more than a reaction to a surprise. The corridor was unusually quiet, almost oppressively so. Usually, night shifts were busy with nurses, patients, and occasional emergencies. But tonight, the hospital seemed frozen, suspended in some strange, liminal space. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, machines beeped intermittently, and distant footsteps echoed down the long hallways. But it all felt slower, surreal, like David had stepped into a world slightly out of phase with reality. Emily finally spoke, her voice a strained whisper. "David." "I didn't expect you here," she said, but her words were faltering, clipped, as though she were struggling to string them together. Her eyes darted nervously around the hallway, flicking from the nurse's station to the doors beyond. never settling on him. David could feel the tension in her body, the subtle shiver running down her spine, the tightness in her jaw. It was clear that she was terrified not of him, not entirely but of something unseen, something he could not yet comprehend. He stepped closer, his own anxiety rising with every pace. "Emily, what's going on? Why are you afraid?" His voice was calm, measured, but inside, his mind was spiraling. He had always trusted her, believed in her honesty, relied on her words, but now that trust felt fragile, like it could shatter at any second. He watched her hands, pale and trembling, her knuckles whitening as she gripped the edge of her coat. Something was wrong, and he instinctively knew it. At that moment, a nurse approached from the side, giving Emily a quick, concerned look before turning her attention to David. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice polite. But David sensed a caution in her tone, an unspoken boundary. He smiled faintly, explaining that he was here for his wife, trying not to let the growing dread in his chest show. The nurse gave a slight nod, directing him toward the ward where Emily supposedly had been assigned. But the instructions felt strangely vague, almost evasive, and the subtle tension in her gaze told David that he wasn't seeing the full picture. As he walked, he began to notice the small details that didn't make sense the way. Certain doors were locked, despite being off. The hurried movements of staff who avoided his eyes, the hushed conversations that abruptly stopped when he passed. The hospital, a place that had always been familiar, now seemed like a maze filled with secrets. The anticipation he had felt earlier was now mingled with a growing sense of foreboding. Something hidden was about to surface, and he wasn't prepared for what it might be. Finally, he reached the ward. Emily was standing there, frozen, her back partially turned. The look on her face was one of panic mixed with shame, an expression David had never seen before. "Emily, what is happening?" he asked again, his voice firmer this time, but still laced with concern. She didn't respond immediately, and the silence between them stretched uncomfortably. It was a silence heavy with unspoken truths, a pause that seemed to stretch time itself. Then, almost involuntarily, she began to speak. I can't explain right now. It's complicated," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't want you to see. Not like this." Her words were fragmented, scattered, and each one seemed to carry the weight of a hidden world David had no knowledge of. His chest tightened further. He had imagined surprises before, small and playful, but this was different. The look in her eyes told him that she had been living a life alongside him, that he hadn't known about, and the revelation, when it came, would change everything. David felt a surge of conflicting emotions: fear, confusion, disbelief, and an aching sorrow that seemed to grip him from the inside. The realization that Emily had been keeping something from him, something significant, gnawed at his mind. He tried to calm himself, reminding himself to breathe, to observe, to understand before jumping to conclusions. Yet every instinct screamed that the truth was urgent, that whatever she was hiding could not remain concealed any longer. As they stood there, the hospital's usual hum fading into background static, David noticed subtle behavioral cues the way her gaze shifted, the way she avoided direct eye contact, the slight stutter in her speech, the trembling of her fingers. Each small detail painted a clearer picture of fear, secrecy, and something deeply wrong. He wanted to reach out, to touch her shoulder, but hesitated, sensing that the moment required patience, careful observation, and a readiness to confront the reality as it unfolded. Finally, she turned slightly, and he caught a glimpse of her internal struggle, the tension between protecting him from a painful truth and the impossibility of keeping it hidden any longer. David understood instinctively that the next few minutes would define the rest of their relationship, that the facade of ordinary life had already begun to crumble. His heart ached, not just for the shock he was about to experience, but for the love and trust that now hung in delicate balance. In that instant, the quiet hospital corridor transformed into a stage of revelation. David's anticipation shifted from excitement to dread. Emily's fear, the strange reactions of the staff, the subtle converged to signal that the simple act of showing up had uncovered something far more profound than he could have imagined. And as her lips parted once more, this time with a slight quiver, David realized that this encounter would change everything he thought he knew about their life together, forever. David's mind raced as he struggled to process what he was witnessing. Emily's fear was no longer subtle. It consumed her entire being, radiating in the way she avoided his gaze. The trembling of her hands, the occasional hitch in her breath. He followed her to a quiet room just off the ward, a small office tucked between supply closets and staff areas. The room was dimly lit, a single overhead light flickering faintly, casting shadows that made the space feel smaller, more claustrophobic. David could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, a suffocating sense that he was about to uncover a reality he might never be able to accept. Emily closed the door behind them and leaned against it, her posture rigid, her eyes wide with anxiety. "David, she began, then stopped, as if the words she had rehearsed 1,000 times in her mind refused to take shape. He could see the internal struggle, the battle between her instinct to protect him from the truth and the unavoidable pressure of reality. His own heart pounded as he waited, each second stretching longer than the last. The silence was unbearable, broken only by the distant beeping of machines and the soft hum of hospital equipment. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice trembling but resolute. "There's something I haven't told you," she admitted, her words deliberate and measured. David felt a chill crawl down his spine. "I've been hiding it, because I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know how." She paused, biting her lip, the fear in her eyes now mingled with shame. David swallowed hard, bracing himself. Whatever she was about to reveal, he knew it would change the landscape of their relationship forever. As she continued, fragments of truth emerged slowly, like pieces of a puzzle that had been hidden for far too long. Her explanations were hesitant at first, scattered, incomplete. Yet David could sense the urgency beneath them. Emily spoke of situations he had never been aware of moments that contradicted the life he thought they shared. Small lies, half-truths, omissions, all painted a picture that was difficult to reconcile with the woman he had loved and trusted. Each revelation tightened the knot of anxiety in his chest. David listened, silent, his mind alternating between disbelief and horror. He tried to piece together the timeline, to understand how he had missed the signals, the subtle inconsistencies, the brief pauses in conversation that had once seemed inconsequential. Now, those small moments felt like glaring red flags, impossible to ignore. He realized that Emily's fear tonight had been a warning, an instinctive reaction to the collapse of the secret she had kept buried for so long. As the room seemed to shrink around them, David felt the weight of betrayal pressing on his shoulders. It wasn't the physical presence of her lies that hurt. It was the emotional erosion of trust, the realization that the foundation of their relationship had been shaken to its core. Emily's eyes filled with tears, her voice quivering as she admitted truths that had remained hidden behind carefully crafted routines and reassuring smiles. David's own emotions swirled: anger, sorrow, confusion, and a profound sense of loss. He understood that their life together, once familiar and comforting, had entered uncharted territory, where every memory now carried the weight of doubt. Despite the storm of emotions, David maintained his composure, recognizing that understanding the truth required patience, empathy, and courage. He asked questions cautiously, seeking clarity, hoping to reconcile the love he still felt with the reality she had revealed. Emily responded, each answer revealing yet another layer of secrecy, another fragment of a hidden life he had never imagined. And as the truth unfolded, the room grew heavier, the air charged with the tension of unspoken fears and shattered trust. By the end of their conversation, David knew one thing with certainty. The life he had believed in was gone, replaced by a reality far more complicated, far more fragile than he had ever anticipated. The confrontation between David and Emily was inevitable, though neither could have predicted its intensity. In the dimly lit room, emotions collided like storm waves against a rocky shore. David's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts: love, hurt, disbelief, and an aching sense of betrayal. He struggled to reconcile the Emily he knew, the dedicated, loving, trustworthy partner, with the Emily now revealed, a woman burdened by secrets and fear. He asked her directly, voice steady but intense, "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why all the lies? His words were sharp but controlled, each syllable carrying the weight of his pain. Emily flinched, her eyes brimming with tears. She tried to explain, fumbling for the right words, revealing layers of complexity he hadn't anticipated. She spoke of fear, of guilt, of moments she thought she could shield him from a reality he wasn't ready to face. David listened, trying to absorb each revelation. Yet each new piece of information felt like another blow, another fracture in the fragile foundation of trust between them. The room seemed smaller now, the walls closing in as the confrontation intensified. Every gesture, every glance, every pause was loaded with meaning. Emily's body language betrayed her inner turmoil. Shoulders hunched, fingers entwined nervously, eyes darting away from his penetrating gaze. David, too, was a study in tension. Fists clenched, jaw tight, heart pounding with the realization that the life he had known was unraveling before his eyes. The conversation shifted from questions to accusations, though neither wanted it to turn hostile. The air was thick with unspoken emotions: fear, sorrow, regret, and a lingering sense of inevitability. Emily admitted that she had been living in a dual reality, trying to maintain normalcy at home while hiding the truth from him. David struggled to comprehend the magnitude of the deception, the layers of secrecy that had built up over time. Each confession was a dagger to his trust, yet intertwined with it was a plea for understanding, for forgiveness, for the possibility that love could endure even after such a revelation. Tears streamed freely now, and the emotional intensity of the confrontation reached a peak. David's mind raced as he considered every memory, every interaction, every seemingly innocent moment that now carried hidden meaning. Emily's fear, once subtle, now seemed justified, a reflection of the weight of the secret she had carried. And yet, the confrontation was not merely about blame. It was about recognition, about confronting a reality that neither could ignore, about understanding the truth before moving forward. By the end of the confrontation, there was a moment of silence, heavy and profound. Both stood in the dimly lit room, exhausted from the emotional turbulence, yet with a glimmer of clarity emerging. They had faced the unspoken, revealed the hidden, and now the question remained: what would they do with this newfound truth? The confrontation had been brutal, emotional, and revealing, but it had also set the stage for reflection, for understanding, and for the fragile beginnings of reconciliation, if such a thing were even possible. After the confrontation, the hospital seemed quieter than ever. The once busy night shift now felt like a hushed backdrop to their emotional storm. David walked slowly down the corridor, each step echoing ominously, as if the walls themselves were bearing witness to the unraveling of his life. Emily followed behind him, her steps hesitant, her head bowed, her mind a whirlwind of fear, shame, and regret. The emotional fallout was immediate and overwhelming. David felt unmoored, as if the ground beneath him had shifted, leaving him suspended in uncertainty. The trust he had placed in Emily, the foundation of their life together, now seemed fragile and fractured. He replayed every memory, every casual conversation, every moment that had once seemed insignificant. Now, each small detail carried the weight of hidden truths. Every smile, every late-night shift, every hurried explanation was tinged with suspicion, with doubt. Emily, too, struggled with the aftermath. The relief of finally confessing was intertwined with intense fear of his reaction, fear of losing him, fear of the future. She had carried this secret for months, perhaps years, believing she was protecting their relationship, and now she realized that honesty, though terrifying, was the only path forward. She looked at David, searching for signs of anger, forgiveness, or understanding, but found only a complex mix of emotions reflected in his eyes. David's mind oscillated between anger and sorrow. He wanted to scream, to demand explanations. Yet a deeper part of him understood the complexity of human frailty, the reasons behind deception, and the weight of fear. He felt betrayed, yet he still loved her. He felt hurt, yet he recognized the courage it had taken for her to finally speak. The hospital, once a place of healing, now felt like a silent courtroom where their lives were being weighed, analyzed, and judged. They walked in silence, side by side yet emotionally distant. The corridors, the flickering lights, The distant sounds of hospital life all amplified the sense of surreal dislocation. They were together, yet alone in their shared trauma. David reflected on the fragility of trust, the invisible threads that hold relationships together, and how easily those threads can fray when secrets fester. Emily's confession had released the burden she had carried, but it had also introduced a new weight. The reality that their relationship would never be the same. By the end of the night, both understood the profound lesson that had been imposed upon them. Love and trust are delicate, silisakan, and require constant nurturing. The fallout was painful, yet necessary, a crucible through which the true nature of their bond would be tested. The drive home was quiet, the city's lights stretching past the car windows, blurred by both tears and thought. David's mind churned with reflection, trying to process the night's events, to reconcile love with betrayal, trust with reality. He thought about the woman beside him, the life they had built together, and the fragile truth now resting between them. He realized that relationships are never simple, that honesty is a double-edged sword, and that fear and deception often stem from human vulnerability rather than malice. Emily, too, sat quietly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She had revealed her secret, exposed the hidden corners of her life, and now faced the uncertain terrain of his response. She understood that forgiveness, if it came, would require time, patience, and genuine effort. The night had revealed truths, shattered illusions, and tested their emotional resilience. But it had also opened the door to potential understanding, empathy, and growth. As they pulled into their driveway, the quiet of the night wrapped around them. David reflected on trust, not blind trust, but informed, conscious trust. He realized that relationships are built on communication, vulnerability, and the courage to confront difficult truths. Secrets, once exposed, can either destroy or strengthen a bond, depending on how they are acknowledged, processed, and addressed. In the stillness of the house, they moved through the familiar spaces, each room echoing with memories, both joyful and painful. David understood that while the night had revealed a hidden reality, it had also illuminated the resilience of the human heart. Love, trust, and understanding are fragile, yet capable of enduring extraordinary strain when approached with honesty, empathy, and courage. By morning, both felt the weight of the night lingering, but also a faint sense of clarity. The events had been transformative, reshaping their understanding of each other, their relationship, and themselves. They had faced fear, deception, and heartbreak, and while the path forward was uncertain, the foundation of truth, painful as it was, provided a starting point for healing. In the end, they realized that life's most profound lessons often come through trials, through moments of vulnerability, and through the courage to confront truths that cannot be ignored. As the first light of morning crept through the blinds, David sat in silence, the weight of the night pressing on his chest, each memory of the hospital and Emily's fear replaying vividly in his mind. He realized that some truths, once uncovered, can never be ignored, and the fragile foundation of trust they had built required more than love. It required courage, patience, and a willingness to confront the shadows hidden in plain sight. Emily sat beside him, her hands trembling slightly, a mixture of shame, relief, and hope flickering in her eyes. Neither spoke at first, because words could not capture the complexity of what had unfolded, the raw ache of betrayal, or the lingering tenderness of love that refused to be extinguished. David understood that life was unpredictable, that the people we trust most can surprise us in ways we never imagine, and that facing the truth, no matter how painful, is the only way to rebuild a bond that matters. In the stillness of their home, with the quiet hum of a world waking outside, he felt a tentative sense of clarity, a realization that while the night had tested them, exposed secrets, and shattered illusions, it had also illuminated resilience, honesty, and the unspoken strength required to move forward. And though the future remained uncertain, one truth was undeniable. Love and trust, once tested, can emerge stronger, but only if they are nurtured with patience, understanding, and the courage to face reality, no matter how shocking it may be.